Well, one thing that, in Louisville, we never do anything small. We do it big here, it seems like. But one thing that's interesting is that every national media outlet across not only the country, but the world has now focused in on Louisville's tornado event tonight hitting Churchill Downs.
June 22nd was a Wednesday, a dark day at the track.
It was not a day that we were expecting severe weather at all.
It was just so out of the ordinary, just so, almost literally out of the blue that this storm formed.
We'd been hearing the tornado sirens going off out in eastern Jefferson County.
I ushered my wife and daughter into the basement. We were watching TV. We saw that it was projected that this storm was going to pass over Churchill Downs.
Heard the sirens going off, so I went in and turned the news on, and they was talking about a touchdown close to Churchill Downs. Then they started saying at Churchill Downs on the track.
There was a report of some possible debris in the air around Churchill Downs.
I honestly thought, this has got to be a mistake.
For me, the first time I saw the devastation of the barns, it literally made me choke up.
It's unlike any other place I've ever lived in this country, and I've lived all over the place. Everything revolves around the racing and Churchill Downs. Louisville and Churchill are almost synonymous.
When people think of Kentucky, they think of Churchill Downs.
There are a lot of special places in our industry, but I don't think there's any more special place in our industry than Churchill Downs.
It's a way of life. I don't consider it a job, I really don't. It's more of a privilege being here.
Well, it's home, and we spend so much of our time here. But, I spend maybe 14, 15 hours a day between morning and night here.
I'll never forget what the Twin Spires looked like the first time I walked in here. We'll never forget it. And I think about it every day. When I get here every day and look up at them, I get that same feeling, and that's a pretty remarkable thing, and it's part of the magic of this place.
Having grown up in horse racing all my life, it was the track that you dream to get to because it's the Kentucky Derby.
It's horse racing's mecca. The Kentucky Derby is the race that everybody wants to win.
They sing my old Kentucky home. Everybody here still cries. No matter how many times you've heard it, no matter how many times you've been through it, the hair on the back of your neck stands up. I would suggest to you there's no moment in sports like that.
Derby, and here's the winner. It's Thunder Goat. Lucas wins it with the lesser.
It's by far not the nicest job trim, but the wall of talk, it's just very, very special.
And down the stretch they come. Lily T on the outside with Pat Day takes command.
I look back over my career, that was the highlight of my incredibly successful racing career, over 32 years of racing and over 8,800 victories. That's the victory that stands out, was 92. when I won aboard Little E.T.
Coming through the stretch and to the wire. Lil E.T. on the outside has the lead by 1. Casual lies is second. Lil E.T. wins the Derby by 1.
The Churchill Downs community, the backside community, truly is a family. There are people who have worked in this industry, at least in one case that I know of, for over 60 years. And this has been his family his entire life.
These people that work here love this place. People that don't work in horse racing or people that aren't attached to a job that they love will never understand something like that.
The National Weather Service is the only federal agency or the only weather agency that can issue warnings, and that's our mission in life in the Weather Service, is the protection of lives and property, and we do that by issuing timely forecasts and warnings. Louisville falls on the Ohio River, and the Ohio River is one of the largest rivers in the country. It actually provides more water to the Gulf of Mexico than the Missouri River or the Mississippi River does. We get all sorts of weather here, and in the wintertime it becomes the rain-snow line capital of the country, I swear. It's always somewhere around here. It'll mix from rain to snow, and you can get a foot of snow or an inch of rain just literally within miles. The biggest challenge is always getting the information out before the tornado's on the ground doing damage. And because most of the research that we have with our radar and with tornadoes comes from what's known as Tornado Alley, the high plains, it's a little more difficult here. We have so much humidity that the cloud bases are lower. There's enough terrain that you can't see more than a mile or two away. Many times you can't see them until they're on the ground.
In Louisville, everything revolves around the weather. I mean, we are glued to the TV when there's possible storms coming up.
And good evening, and thanks for joining us here at 11 since 7:30. We've been covering this storm for you wall to wall here on Wave 3.
June 22nd was an odd day because we really weren't expecting any severe weather. There was a boundary that had set up, east to west boundary, not far off the Ohio River. We just had a slight chance of some storms in. We didn't think had been severe, and the Storm Prediction Center wasn't anticipating any type of severe weather outbreak as well.
I was home with my wife, working in the garage. Nice sunny day. Wasn't no storms out my way.
It was a really clear day. It was actually a really nice day. I had gone to the airport early. My husband was scheduled to fly out, and his flight got canceled. And I remember thinking, I don't get why these flights are canceled.
It was a dark day at the track. You know, we had 2 weeks left in the meet. Wednesdays without racing are usually a day where you can get home at a reasonable hour, and I think I got home about, 6:30.
Me and Sue were sitting in the living room watching television and just looking out the window because we had noticed that the sky had gotten real black.
My wife and I, we had just sat down to dinner and we were expecting some storms, thunderstorms, but nothing real severe.
We was having a charitable Texas Hold'em poker tournament for the backside. So I was here helping with that, and that was about 7:05.
I was eliminated from the tournament, so I was just sitting out on the balcony. You know, the weather wasn't too bad out there.
I was car shopping, so I was out on Dixie Highway, and actually I was talking to a car dealer, and I had my wife sitting out in the car because she didn't want to stay very long with the car dealers.
It was cloudy that night. I remember my son kept begging if, let's go to the pool, let's go to the pool. And I said, not tonight, buddy, I think it's gonna rain.
Was gonna go shopping on my way home to look for a pair of wedding shoes, which is coming up. And I remember going home and going down the basement where my fiance works, and he had the Weather Channel on.
I was watching Andy Weingarten when he popped on the screen, and it was about 7:30. And he was talking about the storm, and there were some watches for tornadoes in the area.
You know, Andy, I've lived here all my life, and I don't know that I've ever seen anything hit so fast.
Yeah, it's been quite a night for sure. I can tell I've been doing this for almost 30 years. I've seen severe weather before, but not quite like this, where it develops out of almost nothing.
They started tracking the storms with the Doppler, and we saw this big, narrow, red storm coming. And they said it was going to be severe and possible tornadoes. They knew there was going to be a lot of thunder and high winds, but the National Weather Service hadn't forecast any tornadoes. They still weren't talking about it.
We get warnings around here a lot, but we never have too much damage in this part of the Kentucky, so we kind of just took it as a grain of salt and didn't really worry too much about it.
We're just kind of watching the night clouds in there, you know. It wasn't really didn't seem very threatening.
We'd had an episode a few weeks prior to that where the sirens had gone up, and I looked up. I mean, the sky's sunny. There's absolutely no hint of anything where I'm standing, and I'm not 4 miles from the racetrack at that point. And I'm thinking, somebody hit the button again.
What happened was a couple of these storms that developed were what we call low-topped supercells. The tops of the storms were only up in the 25 to 29,000 foot range, which any other time of year you would have just looked at and said, well, we'll get a little bit of rain out of these. But for whatever reason, these started to spin.
All of a sudden, across the bottom of the TV screen, we have these weather watch, and they don't really get serious until it's getting serious.
This is the last few hours of satellite data, and look how, if you look at it from a regional perspective, how small scale this whole thing was. I mean, it's really just covering about 20 miles either side of the Ohio River, and just wave after wave of severe thunderstorms coming through.
The warnings started getting stronger and stronger, and then the sirens started going off.
It seemed to hit so fast with little warning.
Right.
You know, I mean, here we were 5, 6 o'clock this evening, scattered thunderstorms popping up.
They started out without any lightning at all, and we were getting reports of rotating wall clouds and such just to the west of Louisville, and then at about 8 o'clock or so we get the first report coming into the western side of Louisville. It's just been a crazy night, to say the least.
We started to get reports of funnel clouds, and so the office issued a warning. I happened to be at home that night. I saw the weather radio go off. I thought it was a test, and I got online, and sure enough, we had this storm that was rotating just across the river in Indiana, and then it moved across, and that's when Louisville was under the gun for several hours.
Well, my phone started ringing. It was the people out here wanting to know if I had anything to worry about. And I said, well, I'm watching the weather right now, so just hang on the phone with me. And I just remember my father kept looking at me and says, son, you don't need to be here. You need to get your butt out of Churchill. So I started heading out this way.
We hopped on the expressway and started heading back towards the east end. And as I was getting on the ramp expressway, I could see 4 or 5 clouds start dropping down. So I felt like I actually saw some of the tornadoes, or funnel clouds, at least the circulation, start coming down around that area.
The storm track was going right through Churchill Downs. I mean, you could see it coming. And I said, man, this is not only going to hit Churchill Downs, but it's going to hit us.
One thing that's interesting is that every national media outlet across not only the country but the world has now focused in on Louisville's tornado event tonight. It just gives you an idea of how this was the worst weather in the country, I think. And it took place, as Andy mentioned, 20 miles either side of the Ohio River. I can't imagine anything like this ever happened again.
So often the buildup is worse than the reality, and in this case the buildup could not match what the storm actually was, and you could see the darkening skies.
And then started hearing the damage reports, and then started hearing the mention of Churchill Downs.
I'm watching the weather, and they've got, all the guys are in there in the weather, and they said, the tornadoes, the sirens are going off, and then there was like quiet. They're all looking at their Doppler and looking at their computer screens, and they said, we have reports of a tornado has hit Churchill Downs.
You know, what's funny about that day is I actually got home. It was shortly after 7 o'clock. I get home, and as always happens, the weathermen have, they've raised the alarm bells, and bad weather is coming. The funny thing is they turned off all of that. They immediately said, well, looks like we're in the clear. So I think the night is over. I think we're about to rest and relax, and literally just one of those things you hear out of the side was Churchill Downs had been hit by a tornado. It was a scary moment.
I've worked outside a lot in my life, and you get a tendency to kind of watch the clouds, and you can kind of figure when things are kind of about to happen.
At first, I guess, looked like a water spout because it was very thin, and this was more, it looked like clouds. Clouds were going one direction and then the other direction. They were spinning towards each other, kind of in opposite directions.
The types of storms that we typically get in the Ohio Valley, what we see a lot of are squall line tornadoes, where the squall lines that come across in a fairly straight pattern west of the Mississippi start to bulge and bow out in various angles as they go farther east, and those are really hard to forecast for.
The sound, this deafening, sound of wind. I guess everybody says it sounds like a freight train, but more just like you're in some real wind tunnel. And then also that sound of debris kind of cracking and flying around and hitting things. It's quite deafening.
It came together and it started twirling, but it was real thin, and it shot up in the air about 200 feet, I guess. And then debris started coming off the ground and stuff, and it just kind of slowly moved that way. I said, Lordy, that looks a little, like might be a little trouble there.
I know I was turning on Longfield Avenue at about 8:08. And the tornado was hitting them. And actually I could see the funnel cloud bouncing off the barn roofs. And I'm on the phone with Darren Rogers, our head of our communications here, wanting to know what was going on.
We already knew that a tornado had touched down, and they were reporting that there were power lines down. Power was out on Central Avenue, which is on the grandstand side of Churchill Downs. And these are big telephone poles, not things that wind is going to knock down. And they were mashed down to the ground, a row of them.
You can see the power lines are down, some snapped completely, suspended, and again, like I said, LG&E crews are just starting to get here to work on this situation. Reporting live tonight, Katie Bauer, Wave 3 News.
It was like, all right, a tornado has hit, power lines are down, the horses are trapped in the stall, and then I thought, I smell gas. On top of everything, there was a gas leak right across from where the horses were trapped.
Well, that night when I drove in, oh man, I said, oh, it was pretty bad. There was wires down by our office where we pull in and get over. The debris was all over, and the wires were still arcing and everything, where aluminum had come off one of the barns. And they was in the process of LG&E shutting the electric off. And it was a little chaos there for a little bit, but it was pretty bad.
We know that barn 23 went down. No horses, 10 of them may be trapped for a while, but no horses were injured as that barn went down. There's other damage out there in the Churchill Downs area as well, as you're looking at a live picture right now from Air 3.
I pulled in the gate, and the security said you need to get down to the barns. It's not good. You don't ever expect, I don't think, to see that much damage.
Dave said, I don't think it's that bad. I think we're all right. I think we're all right. Hold on a second. Oh my.
As I passed the first barn, I could see from the street, the roof was pretty much gone. There was water shooting out of the sprinkler systems. And I remember just telling Darren, I said, Darren, whatever you're doing, get your butt out here, just don't look good.
Churchill Downs still beautiful, but there is a lot of damage out there tonight.
It was dark. There's no electric. It was pitch dark. There were power lines down everywhere, and it was pure chaos.
Here we had this tornado we were trying to deal with, and at the same time we had major flooding.
Around 9 o'clock, it started raining, and it didn't let up until about a few minutes ago. So now we are having a flooding issue. So it's a very dangerous situation.
At the time, we didn't know the exact extent. Remember, it's pouring down rain. It is dark. We didn't know how stable some of these barns were. We didn't know how many, if there was collateral damage to some of these other barns. So we wanted to get them in a safe area.
You know, as it turns out, one of the biggest tornado as far as the number of supercells that passed through the area that I can remember in any given storm.
The sky really got dark and scary, and the rain started falling so hard you really couldn't see in front of your face.
We knew we'd already been hit, but you could tell that more was on its way.
The sirens were sounding for literally several hours that night because we were really under the gun for a long time.
We're still not through the end of this.
You know, people from the front side over, and corporate came over to help people on the back stretch.
Everybody, all my employees, all my vendors, all the people in the community were calling saying, what can we do to help?
We're all very competitive on the racetrack, but let something like this happen, all of a sudden everybody just jumps in.
It was kind of like a big family that night, and everyone was looking out for each other and taking care of what needed to be taken care of.
Everybody worked together well. It wasn't just one person saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. It was a bunch of people coming together and dealt with some other things, nothing like a tornado, but we've had things over the years, but nothing like this.
This is not a woe is me story. This is not a poor us story. This is a story of victory.
Pues yo estaba en el cuarto y cuando de repente nomás oí el ruido y todo y salí afuera y cuando no podía abrir la puerta porque...
Y de repente pues dijimos ¿qué pasa? Pero de repente se empezó a mover lo que es la cuadra y los cuartos, todo donde estábamos.
I'm a native of Southern California. I've been through earthquakes. I'd trade an earthquake any day of the week for one of these tornadoes.
You could hear the rippling of shingles and trees, and then, a couple transformers were starting to pop.
Estaba yo viendo la televisión y de repente se apagó. Vi cómo cayó el aire acondicionado a la cama de mi cuarto.
It was pouring down rain, you couldn't see 2 feet in front of you. Knowing there was horses in all these barns, knowing there was people living in all these barns, knowing the time of evening it was, I was really scared. First barn I seen was barn 23, which was pretty much totally devastated. I really couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Y ya pues dijimos, ¿y ahora qué? Y ahí pues donde empezó a mover y le dije a mi amigo, él se quería salir y le digo, no, no te salgas. Tirémonos a tierra, dijimos, o sea, lo que es el plan.
It wasn't just a storm, it was an ongoing situation. So, first things first, there were fire crews that showed up, crews from Louisville Gas and Electric. It wasn't clear at first exactly how many barns had been damaged. We knew there had been a significant number of barns that had suffered not only damage, but substantial damage. There was debris lying everywhere. We knew things were not nearly as bad as they could be, but we didn't know if they were as bad as they were going to be. As everybody was back there working, as the emergency crews were back there warning, there were storm sirens sounding for much of the next 2 hours.
What became very clear was that we weren't in the clear. We had more weather coming.
About 8:30, Storm 2 getting ready to hit us, followed by Storm 3 and Storm 4.
We were under consecutive tornado warnings for, I think, over 2 or 2.5 hours for part of the Louisville metro area. The last warning finished almost about 10 o'clock that night.
Pues ya empezaron a llegar los compañeros y que qué pasa, pues un tornado y toda la gente acá corriendo que va a venir otro, que vamos a correr.
I got in the car thinking actually that it had passed. Little did I know there were kind of rounds 2, 3, and 4, and I was driving right into it. I'd never been more scared in my life when I was driving down Central Expressway. We're headed to the racetrack off of Crittenden Avenue and Central. It was pitch black, couldn't see anything, driving rain, and I didn't know if I was driving into a tornado or not. That's probably the most terrified I've been in my life. My wife, to this day, does not know that I told her that I had taken a back route to Churchill Downs and was not going down Central Expressway. But after watching this, she may find out.
Entonces todos gritaban, vámonos al puente, que viene otro. Y pues nosotros no hacíamos por correr, sino hacíamos por sacar los caballos de la cuadra.
All the people on the backside, I'm talking about grooms, trainers, anybody that was back there was helping, trying to get the horses out of the barns.
Sí, los movimos para otras cuadras más que todo, para diferentes cuadras porque no habíamos ni para dónde en ese momento.
Our biggest worries were, first of all, getting all the horses, seeing if there's anybody injured in these tack rooms and stuff, but there were several things going on.
Fire safety is right there with us, and they're first responders also. And like I say, we was working right with them, but we had to have guys in that area trying to cut things off so there wasn't nobody electrocuted or gas lines explosion. There was a lot of things going on, and in probably a 2-hour period, there was a pretty good amount of work going on trying to make sure everybody's safe.
We all got together, huddled in Butch Lear's office right outside Gate 5, and started to discuss the steps that we need to take from this point forward. We were in crisis mode.
The first priority was making sure the people and the horses were accounted for. I mean, that's paramount. The question that we all had was directed at, is there anyone left in the buildings? Once we realized that that was under control, that we had really, sort of dodged the bullet, and that people were safe, that the horses were safe, then it became about what's next.
They had ordered an immediate evacuation of those horses. That was a very difficult situation in the aftermath of the storm. First, you had to get the vans there. You had to get the horses out of there. We were without electricity through most of the barn area, most of the backside.
I mean, we can rebuild barns, but I was really concerned about the horses and the people living in those barns. And we were very lucky.
When a tornado hits and you see the devastation to the buildings, you know that you've got debris everywhere. You've got nails, you've got timbers, you've got splinters that have flown through roofs. And you need to make sure that no one puts themselves accidentally in harm's way after the initial event.
A lot of trainers worried about bringing the horses out and leading them to the vans with all the debris around. Where they're going to hit nails, where they're going to hit glass.
Because we ended up transporting around 200 horses off the grounds over to the fairgrounds.
There was a lot of tension while these efforts were going on. They were very cohesive efforts. They were very organized efforts. Everybody was pulling together, but we didn't know if there was going to be another blow coming.
A lot of people who head to Churchill Downs for work tomorrow, even though there's no racing, are going to see this damage firsthand. We know that barn 23 went down. No horses, 10 of them may be trapped for a while, but no horses were injured as that barn went down. There's other damage out there in the Churchill Downs area as well, as you're looking at a live picture right now from Air 3 of what happened out there, but it could have been a lot worse.
Well, Mother Nature has not been kind to the Midwest over the past months here in 2011, and Mother Nature was not kind to the racing world last night at Churchill Downs as a tornado ripped through the backside, and there were even reports that it touched down on the infield. A very scary situation.
And we were incredibly fortunate in that the storm actually got stronger once it left the grounds at Churchill Downs.
As the tornado left Churchill property and went further east, it came across a big parking lot south of Papa John's Cardinal Stadium. And that's where it actually intensified it. And then as it crossed out of that parking lot, that's where it did the most damage in a large industrial building. It just demolished that for all intents and purposes. And it was definitely EF2 intensity. The EF scale is actually an enhancement of the Fujita scale, the F scale that's been in place for 30 or 40 years. This scale goes from 0 to 5 for tornadoes. Across Churchill, there was EF1 damage. I estimated the winds to be somewhere around 100 to 105 miles an hour.
The tornado of the Category 1, I wouldn't want to see a 5 because it was bad enough.
What you are seeing is the result of a severe storm that resulted in tornadoes in the Kentucky-Louisville metro area. Yeah, good morning and welcome to a special edition of Race Day America. No racing today at Churchill Downs.
It wasn't until the next morning that I got a true look at the devastation. Carnage of the 100-year-old trees scattered throughout the neighborhood right upon the arrival of the racetrack.
The first thing I saw, it was this side where we are. It was down, and a bunch of horses with a lot of water in the stalls, and I mean, the whole band was like unbelievable. I never seen nothing like it.
Ahí nos ayudamos unos a otros. Ese día del tornado, pues todos decían cómo estás, qué pasó. Unos nos daban zapatos, porque ese día quedé descalzo y pantalón. Sí nos ayudamos entre nosotros mismos.
Y ya pues el día siguiente ya venimos porque nos quedamos sin ropas, nada más yo un short, una playera y lo que son chanclas nada más. Ya venimos otro día un poco tarde porque no teníamos cómo trabajar. Ya pues no llevamos ni qué hacer, sin ropa, sin nada, tú no sabes.
The reality was you had people whose livelihoods were on the line. I mean, they couldn't come to work the next day because they didn't have a place to go to work.
First thing I saw as I walked in Gate 5 is I looked up and saw the new chapel on the backside. It was pretty beaten up.
As I was driving here, the stable gate called and said, "Chaplain, are you on the grounds?" I said, "I'm just a few minutes away." They said, "You better get here quickly. The roof is gone from the chapel."
I'd seen pictures of it on the news already, but it didn't do it justice. The photos did not do justice to the damage that had been done.
I was heartsick at the damage to the backstretch and to the chapel. As I viewed the damage and the extent of the damage, just praising God that nobody was hurt. The damage was extensive, but it was all material. It was all replaceable. It was all rebuildable.
Afterward, many people came to me and said, "Chaplain, it's so sad about the church being hurt." And I said, "Please tell me about it, because I didn't see that happen. I saw the church come together."
When I saw the first barn, I wanted to cry. And, but at the same time, we were constantly hearing no horses were injured, no people were injured.
I was really surprised because I talked to the officials when I got there and they said that there weren't any animals that were injured. There were no horses that received even a single injury, which I thought was amazing considering the damage to some of the barns that I had seen.
It made us stronger. It made us closer. It brought a sense of community that perhaps we had just taken for granted.
Thank you for being here this morning. We had an eventful last 12 hours or so. We have several barns that are damaged. We've had horses displaced, and we've had some people displaced. But the great news here is that again this morning, as we reported last night, we have no reports of injury to horses or any of the humans who work with.
100 people living on the backside. This is their home. This is their livelihood. And last night they were struck with something that nobody wants to go through, and they handled it calmly, professionally, and we're all very, very lucky that we're here today to just look at some damage to some buildings.
Oh, we know what the cleanup can be like at Churchill the day after Derby, but what about the day after a tornado? This was the scene yesterday at Churchill Downs after that tornado that hit Wednesday. No human or equine casualties to report despite this natural disaster landing right in the middle of Louisville.
It really is a miracle. I mean, when you have a tornado hit and you see the damage to the facilities, the first thing you start to do is think about the people, think about the horses. And the good news is everybody walked away shaken, but okay.
I remember during the night, me and Kevin was standing in the rain, and I just kind of looked at Kevin, kind of thinking ahead, and I said, "I'm assuming we're not going to race tomorrow." And he looks at me and says, "Yeah, we're probably not going to race." So we made that decision right then and there.
On Thursday morning, we started working the track, checking everything, running magnets on the track. We have a tool on our conditioner, has a magnet just to make sure there wasn't no debris. Turf course, also same thing. Went over all the areas. We didn't have anything on the racetrack.
Our biggest concern right off the bat, we knew we needed to have a receiving barn. That was first and foremost. You can't put displaced horses in the receiving barn as they were the night of the tornado. We've got to free up that space so horses can chip in from area farms and be able to be housed on race day.
We're obviously going to assess the damage, make sure that we're as safe as we can be on the backside. I'm optimistic that our horsemen will be here for the rest of the meet. It's really amazing. I mean, people around here are family, and we're going to make sure that we do what we do best. We race, because that's what we do at Churchill Downs. I will tell you that I got a lot of calls from people who said they were going to be here on Friday night because we were racing and because of the disaster, that they hadn't planned on being here, but they wanted to make sure that they showed support to this community.
And we decided, hey, you know what? We're Churchill Downs. We came out of this in pretty good shape. We can rebuild the barns. Let's have a Friday night party. So we did.
The decision, frankly, was easy for me. I mean, I knew that it would be difficult from an operational standpoint because we had a lot of work to do and limited resources to do it. But the reality was everyone wanted to race right away. And so when we made the decision to race, we announced that. We told the horsemen were in full support. And the fascinating thing was that several of the horses that were in the barns that were impacted by the tornado ran over the next couple of days. So they not only said, yes, you should, but we're going to be a part of it.
You know, it was important for, I think, morale, I think, to let everybody know that it could happen, that racing could resume, that you could get back to normal quickly. Every day that you miss compounds the damage. So there's sort of the emotional aspect of getting back to business, but there's also the financial aspect of it as well. And the quickest way to recover for everybody involved was to be able to get back to normal and to get back to work.
We are back up and running here at Churchill Downs, and everybody, all the trainers supporting our racing tonight, the fans in the community as well. So we're looking for a big night of racing here, and just happy that nobody's been hurt and that we are back and ready to run.
Through rain, sleet, snow, and even a tornado. Nothing stopping the Downs After Dark program at Churchill. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lafitte Pinkai, joined by Zoe Cadman. And just unbelievable. The show will continue at Churchill, despite the fact less than 48 hours ago, a tornado did touch down at the Downs.
It was fun, and it was just a fantastic, night racing event. I think people wanted to come back out here just to show their support and have a good time, and it was really great. I actually worked the foundation table, and immediately calls started coming in for people saying, we want to donate, we want to give money, we want to give our time, what can we do? And so Churchill Charities quickly pulled together a donation. where people could give, and the money went directly to the backside workers to help them with clothing and food and shelter. It was so much fun to sit there, and also very humbling as well, you know, for people to come up and say, we're so glad, you know, what can we do? We love this place. We're so glad you guys are back up and running.
You know, I heard many stories in the aftermath. For instance, Jinx Fires, his barn was the first barn hit by the tornado and lost one whole side of the barn. And so his staff could not get into the barn area that night because it was shut down. But people from other barns who were there at the time of the storm, they called and said, we've got your horse, we're feeding him, he's going to be okay, don't worry about it. And it was that kind of spirit that was going on all night long. We received immediate phone calls from other racetracks. Keeneland offered its stall space over there for horses if they needed to be moved. Again, the early stages, you didn't know exactly how extensive the damage was.
You're always amazed and impressed how people who would, I mean, in some respects could be on completely opposite sides of the fence or adversaries will step up and pull together. You know, you don't worry about whose horse it is. You just jump in and you try to help that horse. Or you don't worry about whose barn it is. You jump in and try to help any way you can. And management comes together with the horsemen, comes together with all the other people involved in the business to try to figure out what it is you need to do to make sure everybody's okay.
Probably one of the most poetic things about this storm is there was a maiden race at the end of the meet for 3-year-olds, and there was a very promising young horse who ran in that race,
which was trained by Steve Margolis, whose barn was hit the worst. It was the most devastated.
The final race for the spring-summer Churchill meet of 2011, one final time. Mark Johnson with the call.
They're in the gate, and they're off.
Here comes this horse, he flies down the stretch, just gets up to win in the last couple of jumps and wins it for Margolis and the Kleins. And the colt's name is Windswept, which could not have been a more fitting finale.
That is Windswept, sweeping on by on the far outside with Sean Bridge-Mahan closing the meet out with an 8-1 winner.
It's amazing how these things work out sometimes. You can't write these things, sometimes they write themselves.
We are back to business as usual here at Churchill, but the backside, the barn area, just absolutely decimated. And walking around yesterday afternoon, I got to catch up sort of as everybody kind of caught their breath with getting the horses all settled in and from the barns that were displaced.
This is Churchill Downs. This isn't any ordinary track, and we've been blessed to host the Breeders' Cup more times than any track in the country. And we're scheduled to host the Breeders' Cup in the fall of 2011. So we knew that with the special demands that event puts on us, that we have to be ready.
It was unreal to see all the damage, and like I say, it come together pretty quick. Like I say, we're in the process trying to get everything and get ready for the Breeders' Cup coming and the fall meet, and hopefully we'll have everything ready. I think we will be in good shape.
And it will be a challenge, and we've told people, you know, that we may have to postpone a week or 10 days coming out of Saratoga or wherever back here for the meet. Just because we're in that challenge where these guys were shuffled around and we've ultimately had to empty out about 300 stalls here for the summer.
We immediately started to schedule out what it would mean for the fall meet, what it would mean for the Breeders' Cup, and our goal. I mean, I told our team, we will be ready for the fall meet. Nobody blinked, no one hesitated.
A lot of people depend on Churchill being open. A lot of people work back here, it's their life. Livelihood, and like I say, it would have been a bad thing if something would have happened, all the history here, and I'm glad it wasn't as bad as it could have been. I was very lucky.
I feel good. You know, Churchill's done what they can do to start the procedure of getting us back in shape here. They're working on the barns now. Everything looks very positive, and you know, the worst is over, and we're just recouping right now, and it's going well. Everything's good. It's behind us, and we hope it stays there.
You know, that ran through my mind all night long. It's running through my mind even after, but it's always run through my mind. I mean, in the job that I have, especially when you entertain, if it would have hit on the front side and say it tore down the Twin Spires, that would have been a very devastating thing for us. I mean, not just from the bricks and mortar, but from here. That would have really hurt, but we would have rebuilt.
Every day in the races, we see horses that give their all, that face the challenge, and one that comes back the champion, the victor of the race. We've seen that since June 22nd. In the last month plus, we've seen victory after victory as we rebuild, as we work together, as horses were moved and then had to be found. This is not a woe is me story. This is not a poor us story. This is a story of victory.
Uphill right, whipping and driving, the little horse and the big horse, and we're coming to the wire, and it is Northern Dancer that wins it by an inch.
On the rail, moving up is Bold Reason. Cannon Narrow the second takes over the lead as they come to the wire. They're going to hit the finish, and it's the Southern.
Captain Budget! It's Captain Budget on the outside. Silver Charm at the rail. Those two to the wire. Here's the finish. Silver Charm by a neck with Gary Stevens. Two deadlocked at the 8th pole, and Smarty Jones is roused to the lead by journeyman jockey Stuart Elliott, and they have taken the lead away from